What does it take for an entire NFL city to snap? Not a bad season, not a blown playoff game, not even a messy coaching search. It takes something deeper, something that feels personal. And in Atlanta, that line was crossed the moment Kevin Stefanski's name became more than a rumor. By sunrise, the mood around Atlanta Falcons headquarters had shifted from skepticism to something far more explosive. Fans weren't arguing on sports radio. They weren't just firing off angry posts online. They were gathering, in groups, outside the gates, outside the stadium, outside the building that represents billions of dollars and decades of loyalty. This wasn't noise, it was pressure. By mid-morning, the plaza surrounding Mercedes-Benz Stadium were flooded with jerseys, homemade signs, and chants that echoed off the glass walls. Some fans demanded accountability, others demanded termination. A few held up signs that read like ultimatums. Season ticket holders, people who have invested 5 and 6 figures over the years, were openly threatening to walk away. Inside the executive suites, the atmosphere felt completely different. Calm on the surface, chaos underneath. Phones buzzing, advisors pacing, PR teams scrambling, because this wasn't just backlash, this was a coordinated revolt. And here's what makes it historic. The Falcons hadn't even played a game under Stefanski. This wasn't about losses on the field, it was about trust, about culture, about what fans believe was ignored in a decision that felt disconnected from the city itself. The hiring wasn't viewed as bold, it was viewed as careless. And in a league where owners usually control the narrative, something unusual was happening. The narrative was slipping. Reports began circulating that longtime season ticket members were drafting formal letters to ownership. Sponsors were allegedly making quiet calls, asking questions they don't usually ask this early in the offseason. Even former players were being dragged into the conversation as fans searched for answers. The temperature wasn't rising, it was boiling. And yet, no one inside the building expected it to escalate this fast. Because what started as frustration quickly transformed into something far more strategic. Fans weren't just venting, they were organizing. Financial pressure was being discussed openly, cancellation screenshots were spreading. The message was becoming clear. This isn't about emotion, it's about leverage. And leverage is something NFL ownership understands very well. Some insiders have suggested the front office believed the controversy surrounding Stefanski's time in Cleveland would fade with time, that fans would complain for a week, maybe 2, and then move on once training camp highlights started rolling in. But this isn't any market. This is Atlanta, a city with a deep memory, a city that takes its football identity seriously. By late afternoon, local outlets were describing the situation as unprecedented. Security presence increased, meetings behind closed doors stretched longer than expected, and speculation began swirling about emergency contingency plans. Because when thousands of fans are willing to show up in person before a single snap is played, that sends a message no algorithm can mute. But here's the part that makes this story even more explosive. The anger wasn't random, it wasn't vague, it wasn't just about a coaching resume. It was rooted in something that happened before Stefanski ever set foot in Georgia, something that many Atlanta fans believe was mishandled in Cleveland, something they feel says everything about what kind of leader he is. And that's where this story really begins. Long before Atlanta erupted, the tension had already been building hundreds of miles away, in Cleveland. When Kevin Stefanski was leading the Cleveland Browns, the storyline wasn't supposed to be controversy. It was supposed to be development. A young, highly touted quarterback stepping into the league with confidence, pedigree, and serious expectations. But what unfolded instead has become the foundation of the backlash now spilling into Atlanta. Shedeur Sanders entered the spotlight with numbers that turned heads across the country. In college, he was precise, composed, and fearless under pressure. Scouts praised his pocket awareness. Analysts highlighted his accuracy. Fans saw star potential. The talent wasn't subtle, it was obvious. And that's where the criticism begins. According to critics and several fan accounts, Stefanski never fully adjusted his system to maximize that skill set. Instead of building around the quarterback's strengths, the offense reportedly remained rigid. Play calls felt conservative, opportunities seemed limited. At least that's how many observers describe it. To be clear, there has never been an official statement confirming intentional mishandling, but online the narrative took on a life of its own. Rumors suggested friction, reports claimed communication breakdowns. It's been said that tensions grew behind closed doors as expectations clashed with reality. Then came the most damaging part. As the offense struggled, whispers started shifting toward the quarterback. Questions about leadership, murmurs about preparation, subtle suggestions that maybe the young star wasn't ready. To some fans, it felt like the classic power move: protect the system, redirect the blame. Again, none of this was confirmed publicly in dramatic fashion. There were no explosive press conferences, no open feuds, just a slow drip of speculation that snowballed over time. And in today's NFL, perception can spread faster than truth. What fueled the fire even more was what many considered wasted potential. Observers pointed out stretches where Shedeur appeared confined rather than unleashed. Deep ball opportunities seemed scarce. Designed movement plays felt limited. Critics argued that the creativity simply wasn't there. Supporters of Stefanski pushed back, saying development takes time and that system discipline is necessary in the NFL. But that debate never fully settled. Instead, it lingered. And the longer it lingered, the more it hardened into belief among certain fan bases. Then, social media did what it always does. Clips were dissected frame by frame. Missed throws were debated. Successful plays were contrasted with what could have been. Reddit threads grew. Podcast discussions intensified. The narrative stopped being about a single season and started becoming about a pattern. Fair or not, Stefanski's name became linked with the idea of a coach who struggles to adapt to dynamic, modern quarterbacks. And here's where it connects directly to Atlanta. Because Shedeur isn't just any quarterback prospect. He's the son of Deion Sanders, and in Atlanta, that name carries weight that goes far beyond football stats. To many Falcons fans, what happened in Cleveland wasn't just poor offensive design, it felt personal. It felt like a generational talent tied to a legendary football family wasn't handled with the care he deserved. Again, that's the fan interpretation. The organization in Cleveland never publicly framed it that way, but perception doesn't need confirmation to become powerful. By the time Stefanski's name surfaced in connection with the Atlanta Falcons, that Cleveland storyline wasn't forgotten, it was bookmarked. Because in Atlanta, this wasn't just about wins and losses, it was about legacy. And that's when the backlash stopped being about scheme and started becoming about something much bigger. For most franchises, a coaching hire is a business decision. In Atlanta, this one felt personal. To understand why, you have to rewind to 1989, when the Atlanta Falcons drafted a young defensive back who didn't just play the game, he transformed it. Deion Sanders didn't walk into the league quietly. He arrived in Atlanta with flash, confidence, and a swagger the city immediately recognized as its own. He wasn't just prime time, he was energy, he was culture, he was a reflection of a city that prides itself on style, boldness, and unapologetic presence. Atlanta embraced him because he embodied something bigger than football. At a time when the franchise was still searching for a consistent identity, Deion gave it one. Every interception return, every high step into the end zone, every headline-grabbing moment made the Falcons feel nationally relevant in a way they hadn't before, and that bond never faded. For many fans, the Sanders name is woven into the emotional fabric of the franchise. It's generational. Parents who watched Deion dominate in the early 90s are now raising kids who follow his coaching career and track his son's rise through college football. The connection didn't disappear when he left Atlanta, it evolved. So when reports tied Kevin Stefanski, a coach many fans already associate with the Cleveland quarterback controversy, to the Falcons' job, the reaction wasn't neutral. It wasn't even cautious. It was defensive. Because to a large portion of the fan base, this wasn't just about offensive systems or development philosophy. It was about respect, about legacy, about whether the front office truly understands the emotional history of the city it represents. Hiring Stefanski felt, to some, like inviting tension into a house built on loyalty. Online, fans began drawing a straight line between the Cleveland fallout and Atlanta's identity. How do you bring in a coach connected to friction with Deion's son? One viral post questioned. Others framed it as a symbolic misstep, a move that ignored the cultural weight the Sanders family carries in Georgia. Now, to be fair, there's no confirmed public feud between Stefanski and the Sanders family, no official statement declaring bad blood. Much of what's fueling this perception lives in speculation and interpretation. But perception, especially in sports, can be louder than fact. And in Atlanta, perception hit hard. Because this city doesn't separate football from culture, the Falcons aren't just a team, they're part of Atlanta's identity. Music, fashion, swagger, community pride, it's all intertwined. Deion represented that fusion at a time when the franchise needed it most. So when fans believe that legacy wasn't considered in a major decision, it feels like more than a coaching hire. It feels like a disconnect between ownership and the heartbeat of the city. That's why the protests felt different. This wasn't simply, "We don't like this hire." It was, "You didn't listen." It was, "You don't understand us." It was, "You forgot what built this place." And when a fan base feels culturally dismissed, the reaction doesn't stay contained to message boards. It spills into the streets. But while emotion fueled the fire, what happened next turned that emotion into something far more dangerous for ownership. Because Atlanta fans didn't just express outrage, they weaponized it. Anger is loud, but money is louder. What happened next is what truly sent shockwaves through the organization, because Atlanta fans didn't just vent, they organized, and they aimed directly at the one pressure point every NFL owner understands: guaranteed revenue. Within hours of the hiring rumors gaining traction, online communities shifted from outrage to strategy. Large Falcons fan groups began coordinating discussions about season ticket renewals. Threads weren't just emotional rants anymore, they were spreadsheets, breakdown charts, revenue estimates, calculations of what would happen if even 10% of premium seat holders walked away. And that's when the tone changed. Season ticket holders, especially those in club and suite levels, represent stable, predictable income. Owners can weather a bad season, they can survive negative headlines, but mass cancellation threats before training camp even begins? That's destabilizing. Screenshots started circulating of renewal payments being paused. Longtime members posted confirmation emails showing cancellations in progress. Some claimed they were willing to forfeit loyalty perks just to send a message. Whether every screenshot was verified or not, the optics were powerful. It wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Then came the certified letter. Reports began surfacing that a coalition of high-tier season ticket holders had drafted a formal message addressed directly to ownership. The alleged message was blunt. If Kevin Stefanski remained head coach entering the regular season, they would not renew. No vague complaints, no hedging language, a financial ultimatum. Corporate partners reportedly took notice. Sponsors don't like instability, they don't like protests outside stadiums, and they definitely don't like trending controversies tied to brand partnerships. While no sponsor publicly threatened withdrawal, insiders suggest conversations were happening quietly behind closed doors. Questions about optics, questions about direction, questions about whether this storm would pass or intensify. That's when this stopped being a fan revolt and started becoming a balance sheet crisis. Because the math is simple. Hundreds of premium accounts multiplied by five-figure annual commitments adds up fast. Add in merchandise boycotts, add in potential declines in new ticket sales, add in hesitation from advertisers. Suddenly, a coaching hire becomes a multi-million-dollar gamble. And here's the twist. The Falcons hadn't even played a snap. This wasn't reaction to losses, this was preemptive resistance. Fans were signaling they were willing to absorb short-term pain if it meant forcing long-term change. That kind of coordinated financial pressure is rare in the NFL, where loyalty usually outweighs protest. Ownership now faced a brutal equation: double down and risk escalating the boycott, or reverse course and admit a miscalculation before the season even begins. Inside the building, executives reportedly scrambled to assess worst-case scenarios. Revenue forecasts had to be adjusted. PR strategy shifted from messaging to damage control. Emergency discussions stretched late into the night, because when fans threaten emotion, you can manage it. When they threaten income, you have to respond. And just as the financial pressure mounted publicly, something even more unsettling began brewing quietly behind the scenes. The locker room wasn't speaking, but that silence, it was saying everything. The loudest place in the NFL is usually the locker room, but in Atlanta, the silence felt almost deafening. No dramatic interviews, no cryptic tweets from star players, no sidelined outbursts caught on camera. On the surface, everything inside the Atlanta Falcons facility looked professional and controlled. Helmets on racks, music playing during workouts, media access proceeding as scheduled. But silence in professional sports doesn't always mean unity. Sometimes it means calculation. NFL contracts are layered with strict language, non-disparagement clauses, conduct policies, financial penalties that can quietly punish any player who publicly criticizes team leadership. Speaking out against a head coach isn't just emotional, it can be expensive. It can cost snaps, it can damage reputation, it can label a player as difficult. So instead of public resistance, what allegedly began forming was something far more subtle. According to online reports in anonymous league chatter, several younger players were uneasy about the direction of the franchise. None of this has been confirmed on record. No one has stepped forward with their name attached, but it's been said that private conversations among players reflected concern about development, opportunity, and offensive philosophy. The fear wasn't about personality, it was about trajectory. This is a roster still building, still molding, still trying to establish long-term stability. And when players watched how the Cleveland situation unfolded, fairly or unfairly, some reportedly questioned whether their own growth would be maximized under the same leadership style. Again, these claims remain speculative. There's been no official revolt, no leaked audio, no documented confrontation. But insiders suggest that apprehension doesn't always show up in headlines. It shows up in body language, in cautious answers during press conferences, in carefully neutral phrases like, "We're focused on getting better every day." That kind of language reveals nothing and everything. What makes this dynamic even more unusual is the rumored back-channel support. Online whispers claim that certain players may have quietly encouraged fan activism without directly participating, liking posts, sharing conversations privately, sending subtle signals that the external pressure wasn't entirely unwelcome. If true, that creates a powerful equation. You have a fan base supplying financial and public leverage, and you have players who, while bound by contract, aren't rushing to shut the movement down. It's not a public mutiny, it's not open defiance, it's something quieter, more strategic, because players understand optics too. Publicly attacking a coach can fracture a locker room before training camp even starts, but letting fans carry the outrage, that keeps hands clean, it keeps contracts intact, and it keeps pressure exactly where it hurts most, upstairs. And that's what reportedly began unsettling executives. Not just the protests, not just the ticket cancellations, but the possibility that the locker room wasn't fully sold. In professional sports, alignment is everything. Coach and quarterback, leadership and roster, ownership and fan base. When even one of those connections weakens, instability creeps in. When multiple connections feel strained at once, things escalate quickly. Right now, there's no confirmed rebellion inside the building. Practices continue, meetings are held, players show up, but the absence of vocal endorsement has become a story of its own. Because if the locker room truly believed in the hire, you'd expect at least one strong public show of support. Instead, there's restraint. And restraint, in moments like this, often signals uncertainty. Meanwhile, upstairs, uncertainty is the last thing ownership can afford. Because while fans are protesting outside and rumors swirl inside, the people making the final decision are facing a reality far more complicated than public perception, and the pressure on them is reaching a breaking point. Upstairs, behind tinted glass and guarded doors, the tone was completely different. No chants, no megaphones, no signs, just tension. Inside the executive offices of the Atlanta Falcons, what began as confidence reportedly turned into damage control, because when fan outrage starts trending nationally and season ticket revenue is suddenly in question, optimism evaporates fast. At the center of it all sits Arthur Blank. Blank isn't a distant, invisible owner. He's built a reputation as hands-on, community-focused, invested not just in wins, but in image and legacy, which is exactly why this situation is so complicated. Firing a coach before he coaches a game would signal instability, keeping him could signal defiance, and both carry consequences. According to league chatter, emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. Senior advisors reportedly debated scenarios late into the night. PR teams drafted multiple versions of potential statements, some defending the hire, others preparing language for a possible reversal. Nothing confirmed publicly, but the urgency was undeniable. Because this isn't just about optics anymore.
It's about authority. If ownership caves to fan pressure immediately, what precedent does that set? Does it empower future revolts every time a controversial decision is made? Does it make the front office appear reactive rather than strategic? These are questions billion-dollar organizations take seriously. But on the other side of that equation is the cost of doubling down. Sponsors uneasy, free agents watching, revenue projections wobbling, national media framing the hire as divisive before preseason even begins. Even if the storm quiets down temporarily, reputational damage can linger. Players notice, agents notice, the league notices. And then there's the internal finger-pointing. Reports suggest frustration behind closed doors over how the hire was evaluated. Who pushed hardest for Stefanski? Who underestimated the cultural backlash? Who signed off on the final decision believing it would be manageable? None of those discussions are public, but when pressure spikes this quickly, accountability conversations tend to follow. Blank's dilemma is brutal. Stand firm and risk alienating a significant portion of the fan base before the season starts. Reverse course and risk looking like leadership folded under public heat. Neither path is clean. Adding to the tension is timing. The NFL calendar doesn't pause for controversy. Training camp deadlines approach, roster decisions loom, media availability is scheduled. Every day without clarity fuels speculation, and speculation in this climate spreads like wildfire. Some insiders claim ownership initially believed the protests would lose steam within 48 hours, that once headlines shifted, fans would refocus on optimism and potential. But instead of cooling, the movement hardened. Financial pressure escalated, national outlets picked up the story, and suddenly what seemed like localized backlash felt league-wide. Now the entire NFL is watching how Atlanta responds. Because if a fan base can force a major decision at this scale, it reshapes the power dynamic between ownership and consumer. It sends a signal that loyalty isn't unconditional anymore. Inside those executive suites, spreadsheets are being studied, contract clauses reviewed, legal implications weighed, because firing a head coach isn't just emotional, it's expensive. Guaranteed money, staff buyouts, cap considerations. Every variable has to be examined. And that's where the next layer of this crisis becomes even more complicated, because removing Stefanski wouldn't just cost pride, it would cost millions. And the exact number might be what ultimately decides everything. Here's the part nobody chants about outside the stadium: the contract.
Because firing a head coach in the NFL isn't just a headline, it's a financial detonation. And if the Atlanta Falcons were to move on from Kevin Stefanski before he even coaches a regular season snap, the cost wouldn't just be symbolic, it would be massive. NFL head coaching contracts are typically guaranteed. That means if ownership decides to terminate the deal early, they don't just walk away. They pay every remaining dollar, or at least a substantial negotiated portion of it. While the exact terms of Stefanski's reported agreement haven't been publicly disclosed, league insiders estimate that multi-year coaching deals at this level can range anywhere from $6 to $10 million per year. If that figure is even close to accurate, cutting ties prematurely could mean tens of millions owed for seasons that never happen. And that's before factoring in staff. Head coaches bring coordinators, position coaches, analysts, entire systems of personnel tied to their philosophy. If the Falcons were to make a sudden change, buyouts and guaranteed clauses could ripple across the payroll. One firing becomes several payouts. So the question inside the executive suite isn't just, should we do this? It's, can we justify it? On one side of the equation, sunk cost, money already committed, contracts signed, public confidence and leadership at stake. On the other side, potential long-term revenue loss if fan revolt continues, declining renewals, sponsor hesitation, a divided locker room, brand erosion that could last beyond a single season. This is where it becomes a chess match. Some reports suggest that ownership is exploring contingency language in the contract, performance clauses, behavioral standards, internal benchmarks that could reduce the financial hit if termination is framed under specific conditions. None of that has been confirmed, but in high-stakes NFL negotiations, protective clauses are common. There's also the reputational gamble. If Atlanta fires Stefanski immediately, the organization absorbs a short-term financial blow but regains narrative control. They can frame the decision as listening to the community or reevaluating direction. The storm might calm, fans might return. But if they keep him and the season starts poorly, the cost multiplies, not just in dollars, in credibility, because then it becomes, "We warned you." And the rest of the league is watching closely. Owners don't like setting precedents where fan protests dictate million-dollar decisions. At the same time, no owner wants to be the case study in ignoring consumer leverage. It's a delicate balance between authority and adaptability. There's also one more factor quietly influencing everything: opportunity cost. If Atlanta pulls the plug now, who replaces him? Is there a ready alternative, an interim solution, a splash hire that could instantly reset momentum? Or does firing him simply create another wave of instability? Every path carries risk. What makes this moment so explosive is that the Falcons appear trapped between two expensive options: pay now and admit a miscalculation, or gamble that winning cures everything. And in the NFL, that gamble can be brutal. Because if Stefanski succeeds, ownership looks strong. The backlash fades. History rewrites itself. But if he struggles even slightly, every incomplete pass becomes a referendum. Every loss becomes validation for the protest movement. Every press conference becomes a reminder of the contract decision. That's the bombshell. This isn't just about culture, or loyalty, or perception. It's about whether Arthur Blank is willing to absorb a multi-million-dollar hit to reset the franchise, or whether he believes weathering the storm is the smarter long-term play. And the answer to that question could reshape not just Atlanta's season, but the power dynamic between NFL ownership and the cities that fund them. What's happening in Atlanta isn't just a local controversy anymore, it's a warning shot. Because if the Atlanta Falcons are forced to rethink a major coaching decision before Week 1, every owner in the NFL is going to feel it. Not publicly, not on record, but in boardrooms across the league, this situation is being studied closely. For decades, the power structure in professional football has been simple. Owners decide, front offices execute, fans react, and eventually fans return. But Atlanta is testing that formula. This isn't about a bad draft pick or a losing streak. It's about coordinated consumer leverage. It's about season ticket holders threatening guaranteed revenue before a single game is played. It's about sponsors allegedly asking quiet questions. It's about a fan base signaling that loyalty now has conditions. And if that works, everything changes. Free agents are watching this unfold. Agents are watching. Players are watching how ownership handles internal pressure, because perception shapes decisions in ways that never show up in stat sheets. If Atlanta looks unstable, it affects recruitment. If they look reactive, it affects credibility. If they look dismissive, it affects trust. The ripple effect could stretch far beyond Georgia. Imagine another franchise considering a controversial hire next offseason. Imagine ownership remembering the Atlanta backlash and hesitating, factoring in not just coaching resumes, but cultural alignment, community ties, optics, social climate. That's the long-term impact. This moment could redefine how much weight fan bases actually carry in billion-dollar sports ecosystems. But there's another layer. If Arthur Blank stands firm in the Falcons' win, the narrative flips instantly. The protests become a footnote, the financial threats fade. Ownership looks calculated, not careless, and the message to the league becomes clear: hold your ground. If he folds and reverses course, the message is just as powerful. Fans, when organized and strategic, can influence decisions at the highest level. Either outcome sets precedent, and that's why this feels bigger than one coach. It's about the evolving relationship between teams and the cities that fund them, about whether loyalty is assumed or earned, about whether culture is treated as marketing or as identity. Right now, Atlanta is at the center of that debate. The fans believe they're protecting legacy. Ownership believes they're protecting stability. The locker room is caught in between, and the entire NFL is observing in silence. Because whether Kevin Stefanski ultimately stays or goes, something already shifted. Fans realize their leverage, owners realize their vulnerability, and the league realized that in the modern era of organized digital movements and instant financial coordination, the balance of power isn't as fixed as it once seemed. So the real question isn't just what happens next in Atlanta, it's whether this becomes the blueprint for future revolts. And if it does, Sunday football may never look the same again.